Will I get the same opportunities or something even close to opportunities in CSM if I study in fashion in somewhere like Manchester? I think it depends. At the start, no, if I'm being very honest with you, but long term, yes. I think at the start, so this is any industry, by the way, it's not just fashion. When you are trying to get your foot into the door, going to the fancy school is very important. It's always really important. So going to CSM, people will look at your resume like, oh, you went to CSM. It will be a thing that will be considered more before going to school elsewhere. However, once you're experienced in the industry, it does not matter. Most of the jobs I've gotten, let's say over the past 3 years, no one cares where I went to school. Like, it wasn't even a factor. They didn't even ask me for proof of my degree, nor did they even ask me for like what my grades were, even though I got a first class degree, but no one asked me what my grades were or anything. Like, no one actually cares. You get to a stage in your career where it's just about, are you experienced? Who are your references? And do I know that you can do the job? And is there proof that you can? That's it. That's all that matters. So yeah, I think at a certain point it doesn't matter, but getting your foot in the door, yes, there's that CSM advantage for sure. How can you learn the design aspects of fashion if you studied the business side and want to start your own brand? You just seek the information. In my case, because a lot of people think of me as like a journalist or a content creator, and that's what makes, like, people forget that my start in the industry, some of the first internships I did were more design roles. So I think when I talk about quality and garment construction, I think sometimes people might think I'm talking at my ass. But I think you just have to seek the knowledge. Just because you're in fashion business or that's what you study, it doesn't mean you can't go into a tailor's studio and be like, oh, can I shadow you every weekend just so I can learn about how garments are constructed and just learn about this stuff? Like, it's not very hard. You just have to put the time into learning about these things. That's all. That's really all it is. Let's see. Is it better to have a personal training for 3 years, for example, at Hugo, or study fashion in Germany? You can decide if you want to study or apply for 3 years of professional training. I mean, if you want to be a better designer, obviously the better option would be to just do professional training. The problem is, and this is more just an issue with the job market, is that you kind of have to play the game. You kind of have to do things the traditional way, in a sense. You kind of have to get the degree and then get the job that way, because for some reason, employers are so stupid that they would rather you have a piece of paper that is basically meaningless than them actually seeing if you can design or not, if you have the skills. So unfortunately, I would still advise that you actually study fashion in school and get the degree, because there are so many jobs where it's like minimum requirement, you have to have a degree, which literally really has no bearing on how good you are as a designer. The person who worked in Savile Row for 3 years is going to be better at construction than the person that studies fashion design in some school. But just the way the job market is, you know, I don't make the rules, unfortunately. Let's see, I can study after that. That would work also. So I got both. But I mean, if you can do both, that is obviously the best option. You have the degree and you have the skills. That's always better. It just depends how much time you have. What if I have lots of visions in my head about fashion, but I can't draw them onto a simple piece of paper? So you don't have to draw to be a designer or even a good designer or whatever. I think you just need to have a way of visually representing your ideas, because ultimately, if you're trying to produce a piece of clothing, it can't just live in your head. At some point, you are going to have to explain to someone what you want, whether it's the person that works in a factory, the person that's going to make your tech packs, whether it's even you. So long as you have a way to visually represent that, it could be via drawing, it could be via a mood board type of thing, it could be via just designing something quick on InDesign or Photoshop. There are many different ways to, represent what's in your head. It doesn't have to only be a sketch or a drawing, but you do have to come up with a way to do that though, if you are trying to produce anything. Otherwise, the thing just exists in your head permanently. Hi, I'm learning more about the fashion world. Can you suggest me 3 documentaries or movies based on famous luxury fashion designers? The McQueen documentary is good. There's a documentary called Dries, which is about Dries Van Noten. That's also really good. A documentary that isn't really about a designer, but I think is good for people to watch, is The I Must Travel. That is a documentary on Diana Vreeland. That's kind of cool just to understand like the fashion media landscape and how that historically has aligned with the careers of designers, learning about Diana Vreeland. And I think she's just an important figure to learn about. There's so many fashion documentaries. Where do I even start? I mean, there's the Margiela documentary. There's Dior and I. It's a documentary that follows Ras Simmons when he was at Dior. I mean, there's a supermodels documentary. Recently, people talked about the Brandy Melville documentary, which is good to learn about sustainability. There's loads. People will recommend more in the chat too, I'm sure. There's a lot. I was today years old when I found out that fashion schools give their students access to trend forecasting companies, which makes so much sense. Yeah, they do. Like WGSN and stuff. Yeah, they do. Is there a difference in quality between American fashion schools like Parsons or FIT and EU schools like CSM? I can't really speak on this because, yes, I went to CSM, but I don't know what going to school at Parsons or FIT is like. So I have no comparison, so I can't tell you. I know that what I do know is that at CSM is more about the creative, like just being a creative and creative ideas and honing creative ideas. Whereas my understanding is that in American schools, there is more of a commercial aspect to the way that they make designers think about things. So when you're at CSM, there's almost like not much of a consideration of, building an actual sustainable business and clothing that would sell. Whereas in American schools, it seems like there is a focus on like doing things that are more commercial and building a more cohesive brand that actually works as a business. So I think it depends what you're trying to get out of a school, but I can't really tell you which one's better quality or not because I haven't studied at an American fashion school. I don't know. I'd have to compare experiences with someone who went to FIT or Parsons or something. Interesting. That's interesting. I am a Parsons student, was curious about CSM. Yeah, I just think they have different philosophies of the way that they teach their students and kind of the projects that they work on and stuff. I just think it's a different philosophy. You would have to decide what you prefer or what you as a person, what you're trying to get out of it. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.